Hey, how's it going? So if you're currently a Cal Poly student or an incoming student and you're thinking, should I declare an academic minor? Then hopefully this video will be helpful for you. I'll be going over a few useful things to consider before actually committing to the minor, how to actually declare the minor, and then a few other maybe useful things for you to know. So the first thing I would say to someone thinking of declaring a minor is to be realistic, and that is mainly with regards to the amount of classes you will be required to take to get credit for the minor, as well as the difficulty of those classes. So if you're already a Cal Poly student, sort of think about how many credits you typically manage per quarter and map out, your future quarters as well if you haven't done that yet, and then sort of take into account if actually taking all of these classes required for the minor is actually reasonable, both in terms of difficulty and in terms of actual quantity of classes. And another thing you'll want to consider is actually the registration for these classes, because if you're declaring a minor, you'll have less priority oftentimes in terms of registration, because a lot of seats will actually be reserved for students in the actual major. So for instance, if you're declaring a minor in some business field and you're planning on taking an accounting class, then a lot of times, especially the upper level accounting classes, will be reserved for accounting or business majors. So you may not actually be able to get into the class that you're planning on doing so. So you'll need to be flexible. So that's another thing to consider and sort of be realistic about. The second thing I recommend you to consider if you're thinking about declaring a minor is your actual motivations behind declaring that academic minor. And oftentimes, this motivation will be for educational value, and if that's the case, then more often than not, actually following through with the minor and declaring it will yield positive outcomes for you, because like I mentioned, you're declaring this for educational value. So by actually successfully completing the classes, then you'll get your desired goal. The other sort of motivation people may have is when declaring an academic minor is for the sake of having that minor on their resume and being able to show that to employers. And if this is your motivation for declaring a minor, then I would say you should maybe carefully consider this motivation and sort of understand the amount of time you're actually going to be putting into the minor and all of the classes that come with the minor, as well as maybe other sort of required work for the minor, and then sort of compare that with the actual benefits that you would tangibly receive from that minor. So how do you actually declare an academic minor? Honestly, this process is very straightforward. You can just search up Cal Poly and then the area of field you're interested in, and then minor. So if I wanted to minor in sales, I would just search up Cal Poly sales minor, and then either the first or second result will be a web page that sort of lays out all the required classes that you'll need to take to complete the minor, as well as a form which will just serve as a very quick application for actually declaring that minor. And typically the department will get back to you very quickly. So now I'm going to dive into a few hopefully useful pieces of information to know. The first one is that while declaring an academic minor may seem like a pretty big academic decision, honestly, if you do feel like at some point the minor is not as useful for you as you had initially been hoping for, then it's pretty low stakes to actually drop the academic minor. There's not going to be any significant academic penalties or consequences as a result. Pretty much all you do is you fill out a drop minor form on the Cal Poly website, and that request should be processed pretty quickly, and then you'll be able to check on your Poly profile that the minor no longer shows up and that you're no longer required to complete those units. The next piece of information that may be useful to know is to be aware of the grading policy for your academic minor. So to illustrate, in my case, I had declared an accounting minor, and on a Cal Poly website, I remember reading that it was possible to take 8 units or 2 classes in an academic minor on a credit no credit basis. So one quarter I had declared a credit no credit grading for an accounting class I had registered for, and then I just had the thought at one point to email the department head and make sure that this was okay. And he actually got back to me and said that this was a department sort of case by case decision, and in the case of the accounting department, they had the policy that all classes, including those that were taken from an accounting minor, had to be taken for a lighter grade. And so all that to say is just be aware of the grading policy for your academic minor. Make sure to check that with the department head so that you don't end up taking a class and then not being able to get any credit for it. The third piece of information I'll mention is that the academic minor won't actually impede your degree progress and therefore your registration. So sort of one thing I was concerned about initially when I was declaring an academic minor was that it would lower my degree completion and therefore impact which registration group I was placed in. But this wasn't an issue because the academic minor isn't actually factored into your registration, so that's just something to be aware of. However, on the note of registration, one thing that I had previously mentioned but I want to really emphasize is that while your major registration won't be affected by declaring an academic minor, like I said previously, the departments will often reserve seats within a class for students of the major that the class is associated with. And so you might find it hard to actually get into certain classes if you're only minoring within that certain field. So that's just something to be aware of when you're planning your quarters. So there you have it. That's all I wanted to cover in this video. Hopefully this was helpful to someone, and if it was, I'd appreciate if you liked and subscribed, as well as commented on any feedback or things you liked in the video. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.